leadership position, and also in public and private spaces, but at very high level of leadership, so that they can be able to make these decisions, so that they can shape the kind of development that we want to see. The roundtable today brings together distinguished guests with and without disabilities to talk about how that can be done. They will talk about the disability rights and how far the journey to achieve those. We have CRPD committee members with us who are also patrons of the Commonwealth Disabled People Forum. Some will speak through videos or they'll be here. We also have our General Secretary for CDPF, who has played a very great role to bring CDPF to where it is. We have Commonwealth Disabled People Forum executive members who are also here to share experiences around some different areas of interventions that they have had to do since we have been running with the CDPF as an organization. At the end of the meeting, we shall have a question and answer session where we will call upon our audience to just ask the questions that they may have concerning what these rights are about, anything that concerns disability that they have an issue with. Before I stop, I'd like to talk about the CRPD Article 3, which talks on general principles, and one of them being full and effective participation and inclusion in society for persons with disabilities. Another one talks about equality of opportunities for persons with disabilities, and even equity between men and women. Those are some of the rights that we'll keep talking about and making sure that persons with disabilities are not left behind in the leadership discourse, and that they are brought on board and that they are meaningfully involved in everything that countries are doing in order to achieve sustainable development goals and to also achieve the CRPD implementation. I want to thank you so much for coming. And now we'll call upon we'll go to the next presenter.
That's Floyd Morris. I thought it would be good for him to do his message first. Is that all right?
Yes.
Can you load that up, Claire, please?
With the watching. Okay. We'll watch a video from Floyd Morrison, who is a CRPD committee member, as well as
I'm also online.
Good. Thank you.
Is that Samuel, is it?
That is Samuel. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take you a little bit. I'll speak and then you come in then, Samuel, all right?
Okay. Then we can have the video from Floyd Morrison about the CRPD and what it entails for persons with disabilities. You can play the film now.
Will it play? No.
We can't hear it.
Sorry, can you see the screen?
Yes.
We can see the screen, but we can't hear the volume.
Oh, it's beginning there.
Member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and I want to take the opportunity to wish all
Claire,
the members of the community.
Yeah, yes.
So that we get to hear what they said at the beginning. Yeah.
I'll go back to the beginning.
I'll start from the beginning.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, here it comes.
I'm Professor Floyd Morris, and I'm a member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I want to take the opportunity to wish all the members of the community of persons with disabilities across the world Happy International Day of Persons with Disabilities. I just want to talk briefly about some of the issues from my personal perspective that I see affecting the implementation of the CRPD. First, there is the entrenched practice of the medical model across the world, and seeing that the CRPD is a human rights-based treaty, it is coming into conflict with the medical model that has been around and in existence for centuries. And now that we are in this rights-based approach, as states parties seek to implement the CRPD treaty, there is this conflict and tension that we have detected. And so that is an issue that has to be addressed so that we get rid of the laws and policies relating to the antiquated medical model of disability. Then there is the issue of states parties believing that when they come to the CRPD committee, you know, they are going on trial, and whilst there, they will be taken to task or penalized for not implementing the various provisions of the treaty. And I say to states parties, that is not the purpose of the CRPD committee. We examine the report and seek to assist and guide states parties in how to implement the treaty in an efficacious manner. So the 18 experts on the committee are individuals that are there to assist the states parties in the implementation of the treaty. Then there is an issue with the implementation of the inclusive education philosophy. The globe has seen a deeply entrenched special education model, and the CRPD requires that we move towards an inclusive education approach. And that is something that states parties will have to start working on systematically in order to make sure that persons with disabilities in the main are brought into the regular education system. Then there is the issue of accessibility. How is it that states move to make buildings, public facilities more accessible for persons with disabilities? States are enacting building codes that are applicable to new buildings, but the problem exists with older buildings, and that is a matter that we will have to work on over the next couple of years to ensure that all buildings become accessible to persons with disabilities. Then there is the whole issue of the political participation of persons with disabilities in politics and public life. Persons with disabilities, we're not seeing persons with disabilities being allowed to and supported in the participation of politics and public life. And that is a matter that has to be addressed, because if the CRPD is to be efficaciously implemented in states parties, then persons with disabilities must be brought to the decision-making table where they can assist and guide in the formulation of policies and programs and laws relating to them. And finally, I want to say that, you know, as it relates to international cooperation, we need to see more states cooperating with each other, sharing best practices to ensure that persons with disabilities are able to be brought in the mainstream of our society. And also, we need to see a greater indexing of disability in the development aid mechanism, so that when multilateral and bilateral institutions are giving loans or grants to states, disability inclusion must become a feature of what they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us the important things that we need to be looking out for from what our governments are doing and what we need to push them to do so that we can be in the same space, so that we can move in the same manner countrywide, all over the world, so that we are also like not being left behind in any way, and our issues are being implemented accordingly. I want to call on the other committee of experts from Kenya, Dr. Samuel Kabue, because the issues of CRPD are also like cross-cutting, to talk about his experiences also, because it touches on the same issues. So Dr. Kabue, please, you can take the floor.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad to be part of this process. Yes, difficulties in the implementation of the convention has a number of reasons, or rather there are a number of reasons why there are difficulties in the implementation of the convention. In the first place, most of our OPDs who are supposed to champion the advocacy remain very weak in terms of resources, in terms of finance, and this makes them to remain quiet over a long time, even when things are not taking place. And this is contrary to, of course, what has been termed in the convention, Article 4.3, as participation of organizations of persons with disabilities. That is an area that we need to really look into. And I know, for instance, our country, Kenya, in the last Global Disability Summit that took place in Norway, Kenya committed itself to strengthen organizations of persons with disabilities. This is as yet to happen. The other concern that I see as the problem is quite often where state parties place disability and therefore the focal point for the implementation of the convention. Quite often, this is placed under the ministries of social services, and this means that that ministry becomes the lead ministry, and what happens is often that ministry becomes a lone ministry in dealing with disability. This is what we have seen in Kenya. The Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, where the disability portfolio is, has been very active and really pulling together with the persons with disabilities, organizing various meetings. But we notice that other ministries are not responding to what the ministry is saying, or they are not participating. And we feel if the focal point for the implementation of the convention was put up a little higher, maybe in the office of the president or in the office of the deputy president, where he can talk to all ministries on equal basis, that could have done a good deal of work. The convention has raised quite a good amount of publicity. And quite often, governments are very glad to see themselves as politically correct when they talk about disability. And therefore, I see even in our country, the ministries that are doing very little will put things together when we are to report at the Conference of State Parties or when the dialogue of the state is going to take place. But after that, you find that nothing is happening. So I would think that, one, we need to strengthen the focal points where implementation is based. We also need to strengthen the organizations of persons with disabilities and give them capacity to be able to raise issues. In Kenya, we have the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, and I know there are councils of persons with disabilities in many of the countries. The council can also be a very instrumental body in ensuring that issues of disability are highlighted. Issues of implementation of the convention are highlighted so that they are not just dealing with the programs that they have formed, but they are also seeing this need for advocacy for all the rights that are embedded in the convention to be, honored and to be respected. My friend Maurice has talked about international cooperation. There is very little international cooperation that goes on in regard to the implementation of the convention in most of the countries that we know of. And we feel that the international community also need to come in, for instance, as it once raised the issues of gender, saying every project that they fund, every program that they are related to should have a gender component. This is what we also need to see in disability. So international cooperation has got a part, and I know the international disability community has been very active in, for instance, IDA training various organizations of persons with disabilities. That has worked well, but we'd like to see other organizations like DFID, USID, and others bringing strongly that need for international cooperation inclusion, so that our states are also made alert that this is an area that needs to be addressed. Of course, there are issues of accessibility, and Maurice has talked about this. I need not to talk about it too much, but the whole question of information and technology is very essential, and it is the OPDs as well as the government that should cooperate to see that the right information reaches the right people, both for purposes of planning. Statistics have also been a big problem. In Kenya, for instance, when we carried out our census, the indication was that the preference of persons with disabilities is only 2.2%. This is too far from what we know internationally, and we must ask ourselves what needs to be done in the area of statistics, because numbers are important for planning. So the whole question of addressing the issue of disability statistics needs to be addressed and needs to be given priority in all what we do in as far as the implementation of the convention is concerned. Thank you very much.
So, Sarah?
I think my internet also had a problem, and it went off for a bit, but I have tried to connect to another device. Yes, I'm back.
Yeah.
I want to call on now our Secretary General, Richard, to just give us an overview of this disability rights issues and movement, how it has been, and the interventions that have happened in time for us to be where we are today. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to wish everybody on the call congratulations on carrying on the fight for disability rights. We in the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum feel this has been a good year since our last roundtable. We have moved forward in a whole number of ways. We have had 158 young leaders on a virtual course, and over 50 of them submitted for accreditation at the end of it, which is a good ratio. Many of them have joined our youth forum. We'll be hearing more about that later on. Have set up their own WhatsApp group. We'll hear from Kiembo about that. We've also had a high profile at CHOGM, which was in Samoa, but we'll talk about that a bit later. We've also held successful meetings at the Conference of State Parties at the UN on the need for a disability inclusion action plan. And we also have had a meeting there, which we sponsored on neurodiverse people in Africa. And Emil will tell you more about that later. And we've also been very effective with our Women's Forum, and they carried out a survey, and they also intervened with the results of that survey at Chogum. So we are moving forward. We've also been beginning to set up working groups on environment, employment, inclusive education and law, and disability rights in the electoral field. And people will talk about all of those things later as we go on. What we need to say, first of all, and thank you to both our members from the UNCRPD committee, who are also patrons of the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, and we thank them for that. The numbers are important. The World Health Organization now says there are 1.3 billion disabled people in the world. That means with the Commonwealth, with now a population of 2.7 billion, 40% of the world's population, that means we must have 430 to 450 million disabled people in the Commonwealth if we take the 16% figure. This issue of statistics is really important for local DPOs and national DPOs to challenge their governments. They're coming up with figures under 10, they're using the wrong tools, under 10%. They should be using the Washington Group statistics, which have now been adapted and are much more effective, both for children and for adults. And the whole purpose of that is to get us away from asking on door-to-door surveys, is there anyone here who's a disabled person? Because disability carries a huge stigma in most countries in the world. And that goes back beyond the medical model that Floyd was talking about. So we're dealing with the stigma of the traditional views, as well as the views of the medical profession who see us through the lens of what we can't do rather than looking at what we can do. And so that is one of the real purposes behind why we call ourselves the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, because we see identity first. Whatever people's impairments, they are disabled people because they are disabled by society, by the attitudes of society, by the barriers that are created in the environment and the way things are organized. And that has the impact of making us second-class citizens throughout the countries of the Commonwealth. And we have to continue to fight on that. And for that end, we have been campaigning for now 20 months to get a Commonwealth Disability Inclusion Action Plan agreed by all the leaders of our 56 countries. Now, we got quite close to that. And if you can put the slide back up again and put to the third slide, please, Gemma, then I'll show you where we got to on that. Yeah, that's who's going to speak. The next one. Yeah. So we got this in the communique, which is the end of Chogum, what was agreed. And the heads reaffirmed their commitment to ensuring, protecting and promoting the full realization of the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all persons with disabilities, and to fully implement the UN Convention. So we've already heard some of the problems on that from our two committee members. To implement the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Well, everybody, I think, now agrees we're not going to hit anywhere near that on any of the targets. It's all right to say, well, COVID put us off, but actually the reality is that people are not that interested now in the world, as it sort of seems to move away from a more rules-based democratic approach to one where many of our leading countries are led by demagogic figures who don't really care for human rights. We have to fight hard to defend those human rights, including the Sustainable Development Goals and the UN Convention. We went on to say that heads urged the Commonwealth Secretariat to prioritise and expedite the establishment of a high-level advisory group of persons with disabilities, together with representatives of organisations of disabled people with disabilities from across the Commonwealth. And we're going to hear from Steve in a minute about how progress is happening on that, and to effectively support member states in advancing the rights of people with disabilities. Heads commend the ongoing work on finalising the Disability Inclusion Action Plan and the important role for national human rights organisations in monitoring. Can we have the next slide, please? so we set out a convention, a document, which we got that as a result. We wanted more, but we didn't get it. But we had 7 of us in Samoa who did a lot of lobbying, and we got a lot of ministerial support, some even moving amendments to that communique, trying to add in that representative organizations of disabled people should be part of that high-level advisory group and moving us forward. However, it was stated by the Assistant Secretary, Lou Franceschi, when they tried to do that, there was no time for amendments, yet that was the very forum where amendments needed to be moved because they were worried that every article would then get amended. But it seemed to us rather undemocratic when you bring all the foreign ministers together to prepare for the heads of government to sign something that they're not allowed to move amendments. Anyway, we are where we are. So what we've found from that is that we want to move forward on agreeing who the high-level advisory group and the representative DPOs will be. I wrote 6 weeks ago to Steve and the Human Rights and Professor Franceschi. We got a positive letter saying these things took time, but that was a month ago. So I hope things have moved on since then. We shall hear. We were told by Dr. Machari, the head of rule of law, she suggested that we needed, if we were going to get it through, and the next CHOGM is in Antigua in the Caribbean, in probably the late spring, early summer of 2026. Now, that seems a long way away, but she suggested we needed to get a draft of the final document through the law ministers meeting next February in Fiji. To allow this to go to Antigua. And she also said that if we're going to have any chance of getting that through, we needed to have a final draft by July 25. So that means we really need to get on with convening this group and looking at what we had and what's missing and what else we need to have in there. And we've heard some of the issues that perhaps need developing, such as adherence to 4.3 and 33.3, where representative organizations of persons with disability, disabled people, are actually properly consulted and represented in government discussions on all matters to do with disability. As we say, nothing about us without us. And so that we really need to push on that. We also thought it would help governments and heads of state if we, in the meantime, could gather information on what was actually going on in the 56 countries of the Commonwealth. And we thought that the areas which would convince them most would be good practice on making reasonable accommodations in all the areas we've talked about: health, education, politics, employment, and so on. So we want to gather examples of those. How accessibility is going, not just for buildings, and they've mentioned it's all very well to have new building codes. What about old buildings? Well, they do need to be made accessible. And information, particularly print, and are all countries in the Commonwealth signed up to the copyright release report that came out of Morocco, and which is an international treaty now. Which means that all books, all printed matter without payment can be converted into digital formats, so blind and people with learning difficulties can actually access them. How well are we doing on that? The Marrakesh Treaty, as it's called. Effectively challenge disability discrimination. What mechanisms are there in the local area where you all live? Because all of your countries, with the exception of Tonga, and I haven't seen anyone from Tonga on this call, but everyone else is on this call from the Commonwealth, your countries have not only signed up to this, they have ratified this convention, which means that they have to do these things. So they have to effectively have means of challenging disability discrimination in your local area. Say the head teacher of a school says, oh, no, I don't want that child, they're a bit behind, or I don't want that child because they're blind, or I don't want that child because they won't be able to get up the 3 steps into the school, or I don't want that child because they stammer, or I don't want that child because they behave a bit differently to all the other children. These are all disability discrimination statements. And the parents and local organizations have to be able to challenge that in the judicial system. So there have to be local courts and tribunals, not up at the High Court, but at the local level, so that people can challenge, and similarly, employers who refuse to employ people have to be challenged. Universities that refuse to put in the adjustments that they need to say because, oh, well, we can't afford it. Well, we can't afford not to do it is what we say. And we need to make their life a misery if they don't do it by taking direct action. And so one of the things that you as organizations need to be doing is looking where there is non-implementation, highlighting it by direct action, getting the local press and media involved to actually shame these organizations into doing what they're legally meant to be doing. So how far are we on implementing the disability rights legislation? Well, only half of our Commonwealth countries have actually got laws in place, even though they said they would do it. And then instead of the reasonable accommodations, we're meant to have universal design. And the best example is something like a mobile phone or a laptop. These actually have in them all sorts of, if you go to the access panel, you can make larger print, you can change the background, you can go speech to text, text to speech. We haven't got everything in there, but we've got an awful lot now. That is moving towards universal design. So everything that disabled people might need is thought of before you build or hire or buy the product. Example, lots of countries now going green and moving their bus fleet over to non-carbon fuels. Great. When they're changing the bus fleet over, let's make sure that they have buses that drop right down to the ground, rise and fall buses as they're called, so that everybody who has a physical impairment can get on it. Let's make sure that the bus stops have simple little digital signs that can actually give information in speech and also in pictograms of which bus is coming and when. So that's universal design. Governments effectively working with us as disabled people's representatives. This isn't an optional extra. We did a survey leading up to the last Global Summit, and we found that only 8 of our more than 50 organizations had any money coming from the government to make them work. They need to be funded by the government, our national DPOs, in order to have this representative role. They need to be on those committees and councils. They need to be with regular meetings with ministers. And I agree with Samuel, that needs the responsibility for this should not be with social services. The focal point needs to be in the Prime Minister's office or the President's office. Government effective, so we need that. And last of all, possibility to work with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and ComSec on gathering this information. We have recently appointed 6 internees in our 6 regions, and we've been training them up this term on how to do this. And we're going to produce survey, they'll come in 2 blocks. So all of you expect to have this and begin to gather examples of these things, so that we want also case studies as well as a general evaluative statement. Where things are going well, we would like an example of a doctor's surgery, a hospital, a primary school, an early years provision, a university, an employer, both a state employer and a private employer, who are making good, reasonable accommodations. We will showcase them on our website, and what we hope to produce from this is a manual, and we're talking next week to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association about this, to gather this information. The whole point of this is to show that when we work together across organizations, across the Commonwealth, other accredited organizations and ourselves and our DPOs working locally and with all their constituent parts, we can really move this on very substantially. And that's what the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, which I won't run through, it's on our website, you can see. We're really up for moving this forward now. And as I say, time is of the essence. So I am pleased that we've got the Commonwealth Secretariat Human Rights Unit on the call, and I think it might be good to hear from them next, Chair.
Thank you, Richard, for that rich background on where we are and the need for us to understand the rights so that we can be able to advocate for them and make our governments deliver on the promises that it has said. And that can only happen when we know what we are supposed to be getting from the government. We know what our rights are, And we also have a voice in the resources, like we said, so that we can be able to organize ourselves better and be able to push our governments to move from not implementing the convention to bringing more rights on board for us to be enjoyed like anybody else in the society. Now, next, I would like to call upon the Commonwealth Secretariat, Mr. Steve. His second name is a bit long and difficult to mention, but it is very important that we are here with the Commonwealth Secretariat, which is able to, if I can say, whip the governments around the Commonwealth so that they can help us to be able to achieve what we are trying to advocate for, the Disability Inclusion Action Plan and the real actions in the countries. Who else but the Commonwealth Secretariat itself to let the governments know that that is something that they need to implement and ensure that persons with disabilities are not left behind in their countries. We appreciate the relationship that we have had with the Commonwealth Secretariat this far, and we are looking forward to even closer and stronger cordial relationships with them so that we can have this agenda, this voice of persons with disabilities in all these countries heard, and with the support from the Commonwealth, I'm sure we will be able to get somewhere sooner than later. So I want to call upon Steve to make his presentation. Welcome, Steve.
Yeah, good morning from this end, and perhaps good afternoon elsewhere, and good evening. Yeah, my name is Steve. My last name is not actually is one of the easiest names to pronounce, but we'll leave that to next time. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Richard. It was good really listening to Dr. Floyd and Sam, you know, giving us some of the highlights and one of those big things we should be looking at when it comes to rights of persons with disabilities. I want to start too by congratulating CDPF for his efforts in this past year and been able to push the draft action plan, the draft Disability Inclusion Action Plan up to CHOGM, up to Communicate. I think that is a very great achievement. And I congratulate CDPF for that. It shows that when the will is there, you know, can get a lot of things done, and when we are focused and determined. I remember when we met about this time last year, when we had the roundtable conversation, and part of, you know, the takeaways from that roundtable was the idea of the draft Disability Inclusion Action Plan, and it's gone through a lot of discussions, and where we are right now, where the heads have clearly accepted the action plan and now asking that a high-level advisory group be set up to, first of all, strengthen the action plan, you know, to finalize it and to begin to work in terms of implementation of its content or implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities. I think we're in a good place right now. For Commonwealth Secretariat, it's in the process actually now of developing a draft terms of reference for this advisory group to operate with. The idea being that we have a basic terms of reference which can be built upon with the efforts of CDPF, DPOs, you know, and finally when it's finalized, the idea is that this high-level advisory group will be set up to be able to drive the process through the law ministers meeting process in itself, which takes some stages, you know, senior officials, expert working group and so on before it gets to the law ministers in 2026 February. So that is where we are now. The plan now is that before the end of the year, we're already in December. Before the end of the year, the draft terms of reference should be ready, and then there will be consultations on that to be able to finalize it, so that by the time we move into the new year, we are, putting a lot of action on it to make sure it's constituted, the body is constituted, which would take us to finalizing the draft action plan in itself. And then we'll be able to take it from there. So that is where we are. So we're still going to be knocking on the doors of the CDPF, as they will get into this. We just want to get the skeleton up, and then we'll be able to embellish, to be able to enrich and enhance it. So I can say that the plan is on the table, and we are very conscious of time as well when it comes to the law ministers meeting in 2020. In fact, when we say 2026, February actually seems like 2025, actually, because by the time you get to December 2020, we're already there, a couple of months. So we're conscious of that time. And for ComSec, a lot of intersectoral, sectoral kind of effort on this. So we know the CDPF, have the passion, you have the zeal, you have the determination, and I think you have the energy as well. So we're going to be knocking on your door on that, and then perhaps other DPOs across the Commonwealth, because the whole idea, if you look at the communique, the whole idea is that it has to be as inclusive as possible, and for big and strong participation of DPOs, in the process, which we are convinced that's the best way to be able to achieve a sustainable kind of progress when it comes to protection and promotion of rights of persons with disabilities. So I'll leave it there, and then if there are questions or comments, then we can just take it on. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting us actually to make this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Sarah, sorry, just before we go any further, could I just get the attention of the sign language interpreters, please? Aisha, you've been doing 50 minutes non-stop, and people are concerned about your tiredness. I'd like you to take a break and let Ronald take over for a while. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll stop now.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Like I say, we cannot do this on our own without the support from the Commonwealth, and that goodwill is very important for us. We appreciate the support that we have so far received from the Secretariat, and we look forward to that continued support. Before we move to the actual presentations from the Executive Committee members, I would like to ask the audience if there is anyone with a question to the issues that have been presented earlier. We'll take a few of them so that we give ourselves an iterative and interactive time before we go to the next presentations. So by a show of hands, if you want to ask a question or to make an intervention, just raise your hand. There is a button on the gadgets that you use. There is a button for raising a hand. So if you can use that, or if you can unmute, tell us who you are, where you're from, and then raise your concern. Welcome, participants.
There's nobody in the chat at the moment.
Chair, it's Claire. I've been monitoring the chat. We haven't got anything at the moment.
There was a chat on someone who was talking about the women's forum, that they wanted to intervene on the women's forum.
We're going to have a report from Shruti on that, so we've got a film of that. Maybe we should take that and then maybe ask them to comment.
I'm trying to look for it, but maneuvering also sometimes.
They just said
Well-
CDPF, so I don't know who they are.
Okay.
Uh,
Any other interventions? If we don't have, then we can move to the other presentations.
No.
If anybody has anything to interject in, they can then come on board while we are going on, because we also have to take care of our time. Next.
We have plenty of time.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Who is that?
Yeah, I'm Navidul Hassan from Pakistan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although there are so many things which are changed in my country regarding the disabled people, like the disabled right and their inclusion activities. There are so many issues related to accommodation, particularly the people who are visually impaired or the physically impaired, which I always saw and I personally faced those problems, and still they exist in my country at the state level. Like there are so people who are physically impaired, and although they get job from the state sector, and they still do not provide any kind of accommodation for their accommodation for their commute. Like I have so many people in my village, 2 to 3 people I think, and who go for a commute on their personal vehicle. Like they always dependent on their children and other people, and sometimes they face significant challenge due to these kind of problems, and they faced some accident as well, because of due to the absence of any proper accommodation, relevant accessibility, and the other thing is the proper roads and these kind of stuff. Therefore, I think something should initiate to ensure these kind of issues to be resolved for their convenience, for our personal convenience.
Yeah. I think we've got Abir on the call, Chair. So the chair gone off again?
I'm here.
All right,
here,
Abir
Chair.
Akram, who's our member representing Pakistan, is on the call. She was going to say something about the Summit of the Future. She represented us in September at the UN, but she might be able to answer this question as well. Abir, are you still there?
Yes, Richard, I'm here.
Would you like to come in now and answer that question, if you heard it, which was the lack of reasonable accommodations, particularly in terms of personal transport for visually impaired and physically impaired people? And then maybe two or three minutes on the Summit of the Future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is very valid point which is have raised, because still in Pakistan's context, we don't have any accessible transportation. We just work together with the government of Punjab and some areas where we try to make the metro stations bit accessible. But again, without electricity, it's really difficult to access them. So what we did, like now we are working in the legislation. So as you know, we have the first ever legislation, Disability Rights Act, which was get enacted in 2020 with all the provinces except one province. And now we are pushing to the government for the implementation of that law. Because under that law, we have mentioned about the accessibility is a basic right for all the persons with diverse disabilities. So now the new transportation systems, which is public, they are including some kind of accessibility in the buses station and all. but not in a like individual level. People are still struggling to get to the access for the transportation, and that's the reason they are excluded in many of the meetings, discussions, platforms. They are not getting opportunity to participate in any of the development and corporate sector's interventions, and a huge impact on the employment opportunities for persons with disability. Because the first question they have is how they will come to the workplace, how they will manage their transportation. And that's further giving them more challenges of exclusion, especially women and girls with disability. They are just confined at their homes and not getting basic services. So this is the whole point of reaching to the accessible implementation of the laws, which can make it more conducive. And I think for the Commonwealth Disability Forum in Chogam also, we tried to talk with the institutes, Ministry of Human Rights, Planning Ministry to talk.
We've lost you. You still there, Avia?
The challenges of internet sometimes.
Still, that was a good answer.
Yeah. So just like it's a process.
Yeah. Thank you, Abia, for that response. I know many other people also have difficulty when it comes to accessible transportation. It's not just the people with VIs, but other people also experience other challenges in the same sector. But we are happy that many governments now are trying to find ways of understanding what it means to make transportation accessible. And maybe with time, they'll be able to provide such accessible transportation without people really fighting to have that in place. I would like to also request Dr. Dustin to just greet us. He is from the human rights section also, and is part of this meeting. Dustin, please, can you just say something shortly? Are you here?
Yeah, sorry, Sarah, just having some IT challenges as well. Yeah, no, I mean, thank you very much for extending the invitation to us, and I'm very happy to be here listening to the discussions. And, you know, I'd echo what Steve said as well, just in commending the CDPF for its the initiative on the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, and for the drive that's pushed it to where it is now. And very much looking forward to working with you and other members of the executive committee and other members of the CDPF over the coming months to bring it into fruition and finalize it. So I think I'll just leave it there. Yeah, I'm really keen to hear what everyone else has to say as well. But again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to even speak, because and even coming on board, it is important that you also at least have an opportunity to say something. And we are looking forward to concluding this disability action plan and being involved in shaping, understanding what it means to complete it and finalizing and being part of the completion of the same. Mm-hmm. I want us to go to our next session, unless there's another question from the audience. We had one audience right.
There's something in the chat from Zambia, which might be useful.
Okay. The first one in the chat said, "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beauty D. Bigold, and I'm a disability rights advocate from Nigeria. I am honored and happy to be here with you to celebrate the representation of persons with disabilities, particularly youth and women with disabilities, in the Commonwealth on this December 2nd. Today, I will report back on the Chogom Youth Forum CHOGOM and the CHOGOM Women's Forum. So when we get there, because we are going to have a presentation from our youth representative and our women representative, then we will give you an opportunity to say something. Another, the one from Zambia, let me go down
Towards the
chat.
bottom from Rachel Muma, who's on our executive.
Rachel Noma, talking about accessibility, especially to public buildings and infrastructure. Our Zambian government has an accessibility standard policy under the Ministry of Housing and Infrastructure. This law may be common in most countries. However, this is not adhered to. So what we have been doing as DPOs is carrying out accessibility audits with support from external partners, ensuring that malls, hospitals, schools, and public buildings are accessible and disability friendly. That is also great. I know we really, as DPOs, have to fight for these things to be implemented. And we are happy that we are doing something in whatever way, however small, however big, that we are letting our governments know that this is what needs to be done, and we are asking for our rights to be given to us. Yeah, so I think we'll go to the next presentation, and that is a video we shall watch from our Vice Chair, Dr. Sruti Muhapatra, who has been also instrumental in championing the women's agenda. And in the last CHOGOM 2024, me and her were representing the CDPF at CHOGOM in Samoa, and we had done a survey, which she was very kind to analyze and came up with some recommendations. And there's a video that is going to play to show what that was about. So, Gemma, you can play the video.
Namaste from India. In the recently held CHOGOM 2024, Commonwealth Women's Forum highlighted the contribution of women from across the Commonwealth in social, political and economic field, and ensured that Commonwealth leaders included gender equality in all policy decisions taken and in general inclusive development agenda. We, Women Forum of Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, ensured that in these deliberations and discussions, disabled women and girl child were not left behind. Their concerns were also included. They were also part of the decision-making authorities, and they were represented in gender equality when it was being considered. Before going to CHOGOM, we conducted a survey across the Commonwealth. Mostly, they were disabled women who were our respondents, and we looked at the 4 priority areas that Commonwealth women had chosen. The first was leadership, second, economic empowerment, third, gender and climate justice, and the fourth, ending violence against women and girl child. When we look at leadership position, we found that both in the government and in the other sectors, disabled women were never in the decision-making bodies. In the government, they were always in the lower echelons, and even in NGOs, DPOs and other multilateral bodies or international agencies, they made it sometimes to the executive, and they were chairs. But chairs of what? Gender committee, committee on education, but we did not find them as presidents, general secretaries, and taking decisions, or chairpersons. In economic empowerment, we all know that education opportunities are limited for disabled women, and starting from the primary classes to the higher learning, their number goes on substantially decreasing, and very few women make it to higher education. In this scenario, the few who try to get into skill development, vocational training, carve out a future for themselves, there are many barriers. The first is knowledge of such programs where they are happening. The second is accessibility of the transport system. And the third is availability of funds to be able to join these courses. So education attainment is low, skills are less. So generally when self-employed, their earnings are very low and savings meager. We also found out the respondents said that in the same job, when they went for employment, in the same job they were paid less as compared to disabled men or to women without disability, and this is a huge concern which needs to be addressed. In climate justice, situation is very grim. Although Article 11 of the CRPD, the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability, very clearly mandates that it is the state's responsibility to ensure that in climate responses, in disasters, in humanitarian responses, the needs and concerns of the disabled people must be included. But in reality, this is not so. The responses that we got from disabled women, and some men also responded to the survey questionnaire, it was that information was very limited. In the preliminary stages, when decisions are being made, policies are being devised, they never get an opportunity to join and share their concerns. Sometimes information doesn't reach, other times venue is inaccessible. So in the 4 stages, rescue, relief, rehabilitation and rebuilding, we do not see the voices of these people. We do not see their concerns being addressed. And in rescue phase, when the teams do not understand the sensitivity of disability, often what they should not do. I mean, there are documented cases where you know that it causes additional disability when we are rescuing. And the centers, the emergency centers, the camps, though they have defined emergency kits, these kits barely contain assistive devices and emergency requirements for the disabled. Coming to ending violence against women and girl child, it is again documented and very well known that disabled women, disabled girl child, they suffer 2 or sometimes 3 times the number of abuses and violence suffered by women without disability. But what is the recourse? What are the solutions? Do we have a supportive environment, an ecosystem where they can go and share these concerns? Rescue centers are very few. Even if they are bold enough to go out and complain, how many times police registers these cases? How many registered cases are getting converted into successful cases or the cases being resolved? How many times are they able to go to the court? Does the court provide an accessible environment? Infrastructure is inaccessible. Lawyers are not available. Documents are not available in alternate format. Sign language interpreters are not there. In such a situation, access to justice is something which our policies must look at and consider the special needs of or the unique needs of disabled women and girl child. These were our concerns which we shared at the forum, and both of us are contented and quite sure that we were able to catch the attention of the Women's Forum. Women were interested in our issues. In the forum and even beyond it, they reached out to us, and I'm sure a positive, vibrant, inclusive future for disabled women in the Commonwealth is only a few steps away. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sruti. Yes, the Women Forum was very engaging, and we were able to put forth the issues as she has discussed. And I know the Commonwealth gender section has also been very supportive to enable us be able to be seen in these spaces and to be able to speak our rights out for other people to understand what they are. And maybe so that I can lump women issues together, I would like to call upon Gaudens Bushimiana, who is our Women Forum chair, to just talk about the Commonwealth, the conference or convention on the status of women that we've been also working with the Commonwealth Secretariat, the gender section unit. Gaudens, please, if you are available, you can speak. Unless you want us to play the video.
I'm there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure meeting you all today. The celebration of International Day of Persons with Disabilities coincided with the celebration of 16 days of activism. So we have a reason to talk about disability, gender-based violence as a challenge for girls and women with disabilities to take over the leadership. I'm going to talk about the Commission on the Status of Women and what it is. It's a global intergovernmental body that is exclusively dedicated to the promotion of gender equality, the rights and the empowerment of women. And it is an instrumental in promoting, of course, women's and girls' rights. It's a space where people learn about what is going on, documentation on the realities of the life of girls and women in general. But also it's a space where people rethink, reflect about shaping the global standards on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Where is the place for girls and women with disabilities at the CSW? We recognize that some progress were made and disabled women's organization attend the platform. They can engage and advocate. Few sessions tackle the issues of women and girls with disability, either as a standing alone discussion, but also as a mainstreamed aspect of other sessions and discussions. The CDPF Disabled Women's Forum, we also recognize the support of the Commonwealth Secretariat, specifically the Gender Department, that has been supporting us, women representative, to attend the CSW. And this has been an opportunity to learn and reflect. What we have learned from the CSW is that globally we have seen a growing movement of gender equality, actors from the grassroots to the national to the global level, as well as enabling institutional frameworks everywhere. At the CDPF Disabled Women's Forum, we also recognize the increased awareness about intersectionality of gender and disability across the CSW sessions. They all talk about intersectionality, but also from the CSW sessions and all the presentation, it's clear that most of the women's funds, they claim to be disability inclusive. Then what is remaining when it comes to girls and women with disabilities and the CSW, of course, the gender equality promotion? I feel like the time is now for the global women's movement to recognize intersectionality and the diversity in action, not just a mention, not just in a presentation, but what is happening on the field, how this is changing the life of girls and women with disabilities in practice. There is also the need to walk the talks about leaving no one behind, intersection of gender and other factors, and disability inclusion. Everyone talk about leaving no one behind. Disability inclusion is crucial. But when it comes to the realities on the field, the implementation of programs, this is where we need to focus and put all our effort. For this to happen, we need to generate evidences, disaggregated data by gender and disability that can showcase where are the challenges, where is the gap between the talks and the realities. A representation and the meaning of participation of women with disabilities is also today a must to ensure that the collective women's movement to ending violence. Today, we are celebrating 16 days of activism. Everywhere people are talking about gender-based violence, they are raising awareness, they are supporting and empowering girls and women in general. But there is a need to embrace this collective movement, quite different from today. Today, movement is general. When people move, when women's empowerment programs are being implemented, people feel like every woman is there, which is quite different. We need to see every woman at the front line fighting any violence. And for this to come on board, this requires really every woman to understand, but also being equipped and sure of her safety, security, and support of many other women standing on her side. It should be a movement that ensures that every woman is moving, but also for moving, she understands what to do, what are the requirements, what are the actions. The other thing that we need to think about is understanding that the building women's movement in general today require also economic empowerment. All the speaker talked about economic empowerment. This is critical for every woman, not just for women in general, because disabled women need the power within the pocket, having the money and making sure that whenever she decides to say no to gender-based violence, she can survive. She has the money, she has the resources that can help her to survive beyond the violence. But again, women's movement building and the coalitions should embrace that human rights approach, where right to participation and inclusion of marginalized groups should be core guiding principle for every actor. Disabled women's organizations are experts, and you all know that we know what we need, that we can advise on what and how inclusive program projects should look like. We don't need someone to stand on our behalf and talk about our own experiences because we know what it is. Inclusion of women with disabilities and caregivers, specifically women and girls, to reduce their risk of gender-based violence should also be a core part of strategies, not something special or even separate. Because most of the actors, when you listen to those presentations at the CSW, people prefer to have separate programs, and this is another kind of discrimination. Separate program should serve as a bridge to inclusion, not just a purpose program, no. But institutional capacity building for our organization is also critical because leadership will start by getting organized, getting empowered, and then you take over the voice. So let us stand on the side of just every woman who needs our hands. It's difficult, of course, to denounce violence when you know you are still 100% depending on someone else. And most of the time, you depend on a perpetrator. This is the case for many girls and women with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaudence. That is very clearly stipulated on what women require and what women's rights are and how they're supposed to entrench themselves in the women movement and still be distinct because their needs and their rights are different from the women without disabilities, but they have also to move together as women in the first place. Thank you for that. I want to call upon Kihembo.
Sorry, Chair. We've asked,
Yes.
Claire has asked if she can go. She's been fighting fires all day. She wants to talk about environmental crisis. Okay. If she could come in now and then Kiembo next, please.
Okay, that will be fine.
Claire, over to you.
Claire, you can
Thank you, Chair.
I have environmental crisis live.
Yes, I can. We've been fighting fires all week actually, and I'm going to confess that I'm absolutely exhausted. So thank you for letting me step in. So I think it's really important that we start off with something that I hear a lot. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Claire. I'm part of the executive. I'm from Australia, you might have guessed. I spend a lot of time working in disaster preparedness, and I am a first responder. When I work with government agencies around climate change for people with disability, I often get this idea that disasters don't discriminate. Frankly, that's nonsense. Everybody here in this room, this virtual room here online, we know that they do. Globally, climate change is a magnifier of existing inequalities. They disproportionately is impacting persons with disability because we're already facing entrenched social, economic, and political disparities. We are far overrepresented when it comes to being displaced by climate disasters, but our representation in disaster planning and climate resilience mitigation programs remains alarmingly low. So I'm just going to go, some of the previous speakers have gone into some of the information, so I won't spend too long. I'd like to really focus on the solutions. So we know that we face systemic and physical barriers that make it harder for us to access emergency services, shelters, and evacuation routes. We know that we're excluded from preparedness planning and relief and recovery efforts. That leaves us 4 times more likely to die or be injured. We know that we're not included in training and decision-making processes that would actually enable us to build our own resilience against climate impact. And we also know that during this time, the risk of all forms of violence increases exponentially, but there are often no safe paths to justice. Climate change doesn't impact us on its own. It impacts all of the other things that we face. For example, with our health and well-being, we know that climate-induced health crises such as heat waves, malnutrition from food insecurity, and the spread of diseases actually disproportionately affect us. We have already got poor access to healthcare, and this is amplified through climate change. We saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic, where health professionals actually weighed the value of our lives against the lives of non-disabled people and decided who was actually more worthy of treatment. Climate and disaster exacerbates economic disempowerment. They often hit informal economic sectors the hardest, where people like us are overrepresented. We face the loss of livelihoods in many areas, including agriculture, fishing, market trading, and that's further exacerbated for people in rural areas. We also know that there are compounding economic precarity that comes from systematic exclusion from resources and opportunities for people who have an intersecting identity. So they may be women with disabilities, members of the LGBTQIA+ community. So that is greatly impacted through climate change. We know that the gender-based violence, but violence across the board is hugely impacted through climate change. The displacement and the resource scarcity that comes from these disasters increase the risks of all forms of violence, including sexual and domestic violence. And we know that the shelters and the camps often lack any safety measures, and there's a lot of cultural stigmas that prevent reporting. And again, we're not taking seriously. We don't have a clear path to justice. We're generally included from the decision-making roles in climate adaptation and in any mitigation planning, despite our own unique perspectives and our skills and our contributions. There are many people in Australia like me who have a disability who are part of emergency response teams, and I know that that's the case around the world. This exclusion actually perpetuates any of those inequities, and it limits the effectiveness of any climate solutions. The other thing that it does is perpetuates the idea of us as passive members of our community. It continues this idea that we have a lack of autonomy and we don't have any agency of our own. So what do we need to fix the problems? We need strengthened representation in our decision-making processes. We need to be included in planning and policy making, but we need to be more than just visible. We need to be given space to have an active presence, to be able to influence the decisions and the policies as they are being developed, not trying to fit them to meet our needs after the fact. We also need disability responsive climate finance. Any financing programs and policies, such as the newly or developing loss and damage fund that has just come out of COP in Baku, anything like that has to prioritize the specific needs that we have as persons with disability. Significant portions of these climate finance programs actually neglect any equality objectives. So governments and organisations have to ensure that any future investments are both responsive and inclusive and accessible to us. We need to make sure that we work to hold those who are responsible for the climate crisis accountable. And that means ensuring that the burden of the financing climate responses falls on the shoulders of those who actually are responsible for the crisis. That is the polluters, not us as individuals and communities, and ensuring that we can actually access a fair, transparent, and accountable system of finance. When it comes to disaster policies, we need laws and frameworks that actually explicitly address our needs as persons with disability. Local and community-based solutions are key, and it is really important to note that it is more than just the geographical location that we're talking about here. We're also talking about cultural groups and identities, because we know that we, in all of our having disability and other intersectional identities, we're actually often not included in the geographical communities where we live. So it's important that we look wider than that. And lastly, we need equitable access to resources and training. We need capacity building programs that offer us access to tools and the technology and education on sustainable practices so that we can be part of change in our communities. Often, the inclusion of persons with disabilities is viewed by key decision makers as a moral imperative. I think it's time that we changed that and started using a framework of this being a strategic necessity. We know that when we lead, we've seen it in lots and lots of grassroots initiatives, that our communities are safer, stronger, and more resilient. We also know that solutions that include us from the beginning of their design cost less in the long run because they're not having to be changed, adapted, or rebuilt to suit the needs of persons with disability. This is a human rights issue, and we actually deserve to be part of the solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Chair,
Thank you so much.
Scatter's let me know she's not feeling very well, so she can't do her bit on law and justice, but she'll do a film for next week we'll put up.
Richard, you're saying something?
As I said, that Scatter has let me know she doesn't feel well enough to present. So she'll do something on law and justice for next week. We'll put it up, okay?
Okay.
We were going to take Kiembo next, I think, weren't we?
Yeah, Kiembo is going to speak to us. He is our youth representative who has done a lot of work and achieved a lot of mobilization for the youth with disabilities around the Commonwealth. And we'd like him to just share with us what has been going on. Kiembo, please take the floor.
My name is Kehembo Wilbert, and I am the Youth Officer at the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum, CDPF. Today, as we come together to celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, we not only recognize the achievements and contributions of persons with disabilities, but also reflect on the urgent challenges that many of us, especially the youth, continue to face. This year, I want to draw attention to an issue that affects us deeply: the rising mental health struggles among young people with disabilities. Behind the barriers of accessibility, education, and employment lies an emotional and mental toll that we cannot afford to ignore. If we don't address these challenges, we risk losing a generation of capable young leaders. Leaders who are vital to shaping a more inclusive and equitable future. Recently, I had the immense privilege of attending the Commonwealth Youth Forum in Samoa. The experience was both inspiring and eye-opening. I was honored to speak at the Africa Spotlight session, where I shared the voices and aspirations of disabled youth from across the continent. However, what deeply saddened me was the very low presence of disabled youth at such an important platform. It was a stark reminder of how much work still needs to be done to ensure that our voices are heard and that we are meaningfully included in decision-making processes. At CDPF, we are determined to change this narrative. Through the activation of our Commonwealth Disabled Youth Forum, CDYF, we are empowering young people with disabilities to become self-advocates. We are building a platform where they can connect, share experiences, and collectively push for change. Together, we are driving a paradigm shift. A shift toward recognizing disability as not a limitation, but as a valuable dimension of human diversity. Through a survey conducted by CDYF, we listened to the voices of disabled youth across the Commonwealth. Their message was loud and clear: we want to be included. They highlighted critical gaps that need urgent attention. 1. Accessible education to ensure that every young person, regardless of their abilities, has an equal opportunity to learn and grow. 2. Job opportunities that recognize our potential and value in the workforce. 3. Support in disaster management efforts, because during times of crisis, disabled individuals are often left behind. It is time for all of us, governments, organizations, and society, to step up and invest in the potential of young disabled people. It is time to ensure that platforms like the Commonwealth Youth Forum and beyond are accessible to everyone. As we celebrate this day, let us commit to building a world where disability is no longer seen as a disadvantage, but embraced as a part of our collective humanity. Let us take actionable steps toward inclusion and make sure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kihembo. Yeah, we must let our youth lead now so that they can gain the experience to be even the leaders of tomorrow as we exit this space as the older ones. As we mentor them, we need to give them the space to also be able to lead. We are talking about leadership and amplifying the voices of leadership as per the theme for this year's International Day. So I want to call upon another youthful representative, Saishta Parwin, who is also a youth representative in the executive, to talk about the ministers' meeting year of the youth and CHOGM, including our youth leaders' capacity building work that we've been carrying around. Saishta, please take the floor.
Not sure she's on the call.
She's not.
I think so.
I couldn't see her.
Did she send any?
She hasn't sent anything.
No.
Right,
Okay.
but we could ask if there's any other youth on the call who want to say. So I see another member of our executive is there, Nazim Goret. She might want to say something. Who's in the youth?
Yeah, they can go ahead. Goretti.
She was there. Let's see if she's still there.
Goretti, are you able to speak up?
There's also, who else is there? There's Yusuf, who's there, who can speak through his interpreter, as he's using the sign interpreter, so maybe he could say something.
You can unmute yourself.
He'd
or
need
your
to come on to
interpreter.
sign, and then she'd have to voice the signing, yes?
Yeah.
If his camera's working, he can do that.
I can't see him listed, actually.
He's at the bottom,
Okay.
but he hasn't got his camera on. We could ask him to unmute.
I could if I could get to his name. Could you ask him, please, on
Yeah,
the
I
thing?
have.
Okay.
Yusuf, yeah, Yahaya.
I've asked him to start his video. So. That's, have we got any other people? There's some people who are on the course, I think. There's Builder is there, and there's a couple of others.
Yeah, anyone who has taken the course can speak a bit.
Kembio's online, but he'll have to use the chat. So he could answer some things if anybody asks some things on the chat. But there are several youth under 30s who did the course. If any of you'd like to say something, that would be useful. No.
Are there some youth on the call?
There are, but they're a bit shy by the sound of it.
Okay, they will be.
Anyway, can maybe come back in a bit. Shall we press on then, I think?
I think we can move to the next presentation, where we'll ask Rhoda Galan from Malta.
I'm not sure she's on at the moment. She was going to come about 2, she said, so we're not quite there yet. Why don't we take Emil?
Abia. Okay. Okay,
Emil. Is Abia still on? Abia's gone. So she had her say. We've got Emil. Emil, do you want to do it in person, Emil, or do you want us to show the film?
I don't mind, Richard. What do you think?
Why don't we show the film? It's very succinct, and then you can come on to answer any points raised by it. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
So can we put up Emil's film, and then he'll answer any points from it?
Good day. My name is Dr. Emil Gous and I represent underrepresented groups on the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum. It is a privilege to stand before you today as we celebrate International Day of Persons with Disabilities and reflect on the progress we have made towards creating a more inclusive and equitable world. This year's theme, Leaving No One Behind, is a powerful reminder of the urgent need to uplift our voices of those who are often being overlooked in the conversation about disability rights and representation. Today I want to speak to you about the importance of representing the underrepresented. It is not just an obligation, it is a moral imperative. Every voice matters and every story adds value to the fabric of our collective advocacy. We saw this truth come alive during the historic COP17 side event held earlier this year. For the first time in the history of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities COP17 event, autism self-advocates from across Africa shared their personal narratives and their lived experiences. This groundbreaking moment shattered barriers and silence and invisibility, giving rise to stories that revealed not only the challenges but also the resilience and potential of individuals who have long been overlooked and been excluded. Their voices carried with them the weight of an entire community. Communities that have been denied a seat at the table for far too long. It was a moment of collective triumph and a poignant reminder that inclusion is not just a privilege to be granted, but a right to be represented. These events, like for instance the COP17 side event, underscore a fundamental truth. Representation transforms lives. When we amplify the voices of the underrepresented, we foster belonging, dismantle barriers, and create pathways for empowerment. But Unfortunately, representation does more than this. This fuels systematic change. When a person from an underrepresented group takes the stage, they become a catalyst for challenging stereotypes and shifting perceptions. Their voices spark conversations that ripple through policies, practice, and attitudes. They remind decision makers and stakeholders of the urgency to invest in inclusive education, accessible environments, and equitable opportunities for all. And this is why we can't stop here. Representation cannot be a token, it must be consistent, intentional, and it must be authentic. We need to continue creating spaces where underrepresented groups can share their stories, not as an afterthought, but as a priority for all. As we move forward, let us remember that individuals who made history at COS 17, the South Advocates, let their inspire us to keep breaking barriers down and opening doors. Let their stories remind us that representation is not about charity, but about justice. So on this International Day of Persons with Disabilities, let us commit ourselves ensuring that no voice is left unheard, no group is left behind, and no dream is left unrealized. Together, we can create a world where every person, regardless of their identity or circumstances, or even their diversity, has the opportunity to thrive and to form part of society. Thank you very much.
We've got Goret is back on the call now, Chair. So
Thank you, Emil. Abia is back.
okay. We've got Abia and we've got Goret and we've also got Rose who could say something, and then I think we could throw it open after that, Chair.
Okay. Is Kerry-Ann in the call?
No,
She
I've
also-
sent her a message. I'll send her one more to see if she can come now. Okay.
Okay. I think then let's take on the youth. Thank you so much, Emil. Thank you so much for reminding us that nobody should be left behind regardless of the type of disability and diversity that they have. And that inclusion is very key because the underrepresented or disabilities that are not visible have been left behind in the past. So that representation is very key. And thank you so much for your interventions. Let me now call upon the youthful lot. We start with Rose Umutesi, or?
She's not youth, she's in mental health, but Goret.
Goretti. Goretti, you can tell us about the training and what the trainings are about, or how they have helped, and how they are, what you have gained from the training, Goretti. Can you hear me?
I saw her on the. Yeah, she's still there. We've got Abia back on as well, and
yeah. Goretti speaking.
No, that was Abia briefly.
Oh, okay.
I think the connections are pretty bad for some people at the moment.
Okay. I think we can call on Abia. Abia Akrim is also an executive member, and she represented CDPF at the Summit of the Future to just tell us about the same. Welcome, Abia. Abia?
Yeah, we can just about see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Thank you. Sorry, like my connection is not very good, but I'll just try to speak with. Thank you for having me today. And I was hearing a very excellent interventions from all the speakers. So thank you so much for organizing this conversation today. While we are celebrating the International Disability Day tomorrow globally and also the 16 days of activism, I think this is really important to talk from the implementation side of the Pact for the Future. We were part of the Summit for the Future just recently, and with the Secretary General and with all the stakeholders, we were talking and more focused on the 4 areas of the Pact for the Future. So one was more on the gender perspective, like how the youth engagement all over the world is much needed. I know there was a feedback from many of the regions that why always the young people have to take the lead. Where is the solidarity among the older people? What kind of like support they are providing? So there was a link in the Asia Pacific region that they have said like we will not be participating in the conversation. So that was just like one impact that we have seen. But apart from that, they were talking more about the inclusivity, the technology, how we can use that. And third, more major aspect of the Pact for the Future is about the data and the segregation of the data and how we could, modify that in the global south, because we have been seeing in the global south, the data is the biggest challenge when we talk about the climate change, when we talk about the young people with disabilities engagement, when we talk about the employment opportunities, it's all linked with the data segregation. So this was one of the very important points. And then we also talked about the financial and the budgetary allocations for the disability inclusion, and that bit was what included and linked it with our policy as well, which we were discussing about the implementation on that. So how we could, link all these dots to talk more focused, because next year there is a social summit which is coming. So in that, for a few future summit, we could provide that details of our Commonwealth countries, what we are experiencing, and how our governments are more engaged in that. So this was just a brief on the Pact for the Future, but also in that Summit for the Future discussions, we had a lot of bilateral meetings with the Special Reporter on Disability, with the the UN Disability Inclusion Development Policy. So we also talked to them about the Commonwealth Disability Forum, how they can integrate it that. They are going to launch a report next year. So in that report, they were evaluation report from the Andes. So they want to incorporate some of the recommendations from the Commonwealth Disability Forum as well. And just one point about the Beijing 30 plus review. I think Claire, she already mentioned she was part of the Asia Pacific regional discussions. But next year, early next year in March, if we could put some recommendations from the Commonwealth Women with Disability Network, that will be also amazing. Good to contribute in that platform. Thirdly, for the Global Disability Summit also, they were taking some of the recommendations from the Summit for the Future to the Global Disability Summit. So maybe we could just link it with that as well, like what kind of like role we are contributing in that. Just one last point I want to highlight about FCDO, they are also reviewing their policy, the disability inclusion. Maybe on that, we should have already sent out the email, but they have included one part of the Commonwealth Disability Forum, because they were saying like they have assisted us in reviewing and developing the strategy. So I think this is really great that we have a good presence there, and we will also post that for the other aspects as well. But this is just like the highlight from these forums. But if you have any questions, I could highlight. But for now, I think, yeah, thank you.
Very good. Could you send me those documents so that I can circulate them on the links as well, please? Thank you. There's also Nyasha there, who's the African Union ambassador.
Yes, I'll do that.
Yeah. And I want to come back in on the some of the ministers' meetings, what we've been doing at those.
Yes.
You're ready. Okay. Thank you, Abia.
Thank you so much.
I sent a message to Goret. She's not answered, so I assume she doesn't want to speak. So unless you do want to speak, Goret, in which case signify. But otherwise, we could take Ambassador Nyasha Nahu, who's joined the call. He's the Ambassador for Disability for the African Union. And if you'd like to say a few words, we'd welcome you to join us. You did a lot of work with African countries to get them to support the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. So welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you very much for having me in this meeting. I just want to thank everyone who presented today. I was actually following from the start. Just want to thank Floyd Morris, Dr. Samuel Kabue, almost everyone who presented. And I just want also to thank the Commonwealth Secretariat for giving us support as we are fighting towards the adoption of the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Chair, maybe if there isn't anybody wishing to speak, shall I round up on the meetings and then we can open it up to anybody who wants to ask questions?
I saw a hand from Prezana.
Okay, let him come in now if he wants to.
Prezana, you can speak if you wanted to say something.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just listening to the conversations and just want to make one point with regard to the intervention by Abia about the disability inclusive budgeting. In the UN PRP, there is one very good guideline for precondition for disability inclusion. There are 6 areas mentioned. One is the CRPD compliant budgeting. So we can take that as a proper way to introduce disability inclusive budgeting. The CRPD compliant budgeting, what they basically mention is to any government who's spending money on new things, that money should be CRPD compliant, which means that the fund should not create new barriers. So that is a very, very good point for my understanding. So that way it will become a more disability inclusive budgeting. So I think it's a good way for us to initiate and lobby for the governments to comply with the CRPD compliant budgeting by not creating new barriers.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if people want to find out more about that, it's on Module 6 of our youth leadership training. We've got stuff about that type of inclusive budgeting and some examples from India and various other places of it being applied. So you can find out more there.
We have a hand from Patience Ogolo.
Okay.
Patience, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome. Take the floor, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone, and thank you to all the presenters. Really have done a very, very good job. Yes, I just wanted to add to the one that presented by Claire on climate change and information and other related issues. I just wanted to say that this is a very, very key and it seems, especially in some country, like an emerging issue around persons with disability. And it's very critical because for us in Nigeria, it's one thing that is unveiling. And even as we are working in that area, even the institutions that have to do with government agencies that have to do with climate change are also, they don't really have that knowledge around issues of climate change as regard persons with disability. So it's very, very critical that we have that as one of the very important things that we need to highlight within our Commonwealth countries, so that people begin to see that climate change also impacts persons with disability in all areas. And I just also want to say, just to contribute a little bit around Kemal's presentation that yes, youths with disability is a very, very critical area, and I agree with him to say that there's a low representation, and we need to actually also do a kind of mentorship amongst ourselves, maybe between a kind of a intergeneration equality, so that we begin to mentor our young persons with disability, especially women with disabilities, so that we'll be able to build a better future for everyone. Thank you.
Good suggestion.
Thank you, Patience. Now I think I can hand over to Richard to.
Okay, I wanted to just say we've been also going to Commonwealth Ministers meetings where we can afford it and where we can get there. We've had representation at the Youth Ministers meeting last September. Last August, we had representation at the Women's meeting in the Bahamas. The Youth meeting was in London. There was also a meeting in Tanzania on the law, and our chair went to that, as well as SCADA, who's not been well enough to report back on it. But I just wanted to say, if you want to find out more of our position on the law ministers meeting, we put out a briefing there, had a very successful meeting with the Commonwealth Human Rights Unit. So thank you to them for that. And raise this very important issue. Clearly, it's important because people are saying if we want to get our disability inclusion action plan through, it has to go through the next law ministers meeting in February in Fiji 26. So the key issue really is laws being passed, but then not mechanisms being implemented to make the convention a reality to the ordinary lives of disabled people. Often people just think of law and order, you know, and people burgling and thieving and attacking. We've heard about gender violence and that much more should be done to equip the police and the courts to deal with that effectively, because men won't stop doing it until they know there's a penalty, because unfortunately it's deeply embedded. It's not part of their nature. It's a socially acquired thing, sexism and the way they treat women, and that has to change. It's part of the human rights approach. So we fully support that, and the position was put well and argued in August a year ago. But we also think that the law needs to apply, as I said earlier, to all aspects of life. If people are denied access to services, if they are denied access to healthcare or education or employment, the law needs to be seen to be operating there. And so there's a lot of work to do to train the judiciary, to train the police forces in disability equality. And there's a role there for DPOs, OPDs around the Commonwealth to actually get themselves up to speed on that. We also actually contributed to a seminar on modern day slavery, and we found that there were many disproportionate number of disabled people being treated as modern day slaves. And this isn't a minor issue. There's more than 50 million identified around the world and a substantial number in the Commonwealth. This is often where people with intellectual impairments are treated for without being paid the going rate for a job, or no rate at all, are often kept captive and made to do work for people. And often people don't know their rights. So we think it's really important, bringing us on to education. We were at the Commonwealth Education Ministers meeting. We put in a bulletin. Unfortunately, we didn't get to speak because it was cramped into Hamilton House to the ministers, as we had in previous meetings. We had to go into the breakout rooms, but we did put a broadsheet round, and both of these broadsheets are up on our website so people can see our policies in this area. Let me just outline where we are. Obviously, we support the move towards inclusive education. The key documents here are Article 24 of the Convention, but also General Comment number 4, which actually puts flesh and blood on the bones of Article 24, and people should all read that if they're wanting to develop campaigns and work around education. And this requires free primary education for all. So that means all children, whatever their impairment, need to be able to go to primary school. And increasingly, that in order to do that, research around the world shows that we need to get them into pre-education, early years education, from 3 to 6 or 3 to 7, whenever school starts, because if you're not involved at that stage, it's very difficult. And there's lots of examples around the world of how to make that work. Community-based rehabilitation is something that needs to be looked at. It has moved over to a social model approach from its old medical model. And field workers go from house to house, convincing parents of disabled children that their child should get educated, that there is a means for them to be educated, and making a bridge to the local school, and if necessary, linking up training with that school. And we've looked at an example from Fiji, where there'd been a survey of all children, and in identifying disabled children, with teachers being equipped to do this. And then that was put onto an education management support data network. And from that, the administrators there were able to provide the supports that were needed, including training for the staff at that particular school. But non-common impairments, it's not likely that teachers and staff in schools will know how to deal with that issue. So it's very important that the education department provides training and support for people on actually accommodating the needs of different learners. What else do we need for this inclusive education to work? Well, we need the barriers to be removed. We need accessible schools. We need the physical barriers removed. We need toilets that are decent, and this has an impact on gender and education as well, where girls, particularly when they're coming up to their periods, the hot toilet is foul. They're not going to go there. They'll often miss school. This impacts on them, and it impacts even more on disabled girls. So we need to make sure that the toilets are good. There's proper hygiene and water supply there, that there is drinking water, that there is electricity, because if you don't have electricity, whether it's through solar panels, wind power, or biological power, we don't want to have carbon power, then we can power up electronic devices, which are essential now for disabled youth to actually begin to learn and understand the curriculum. And there are cheaper ways of doing that. In fact, our youth officer, Kiembo, has a brilliant film out, and we'll put the link up on the website, showing how working with small devices, he's managed to actually off the grid prime them up with information. So you don't even need to be internet connected as long as the device has the information on it for young people to benefit from this. We need a curriculum that is for all. The curriculum is far too rigid in too many countries in the Commonwealth. It's based on the old grade system. And so I have found in my travels around the world on inclusion, I do a lot of work on inclusion, the oldest child in a primary classroom I found was in Lesotho, who was 27 years old, because he had never managed to get up past the grade exams. What we argue for inclusion, and what the UN argue, is that children should move up with their age cohort. They should be evaluated on the value added that they put on each year, not to normative tests, but tests that are based around what they knew before and what they know now, activities they can do, and we can involve peers in this. Peer support, peer tutoring is crucial. So where you have a classroom of 60 or 70 and all the desks are facing the front, turn the desks around, put them into squares, and get the peers to support each other in learning different activities. Make the curriculum do the work, rather than the teacher from the front, all the chalk and talk. We need to change the role of the teacher to be a facilitator of the learning at different rates, in different ways, with different supports in the classroom, so that all can make progress. This model is still not being adopted in most countries around the Commonwealth, and needs to be if we're going to make progress. We need to get away from the old special educational needs model to a rights-based model, where every child is valued for who they are, what they can do, rather than the old special needs model, which is identifying children by what they can't do and then providing extra resources to them. This model which leads to segregation and dropping out and exclusion, is against human rights. And we really need to work hard in all our authorities, on all our schools and all our countries to challenge this. We put in a briefing that said this, and it had some impact, but we would like to see at the next education ministers meeting that inclusion was actually at the center of it, because it skirted around it. It didn't deal with the real issues about it. So the Commonwealth needs to wake its ideas up, really, and come into line with what the Convention requires on things like gender rights, youth rights, women's rights, health rights, and law, because that's where we need to be going into the future. And we will do our part as the Commonwealth Disabled People's Forum on that. But we need all of you locally to be putting pressure on your government to do this. Don't sit back and think, oh, there's nothing we can do. We've heard loads of examples where you can get out and organize, whether it's doing an access audit, whether it's having a media campaign, whether it's lobbying Parliament, whether it's lobbying the parties of Parliament to make sure that they have disabled people on their platforms to stand for election. We've made great progress in this year of elections in 2024, and we have reports up on the website about this. But people are voting more now, but they're still not standing for Parliament. They're still not getting elected. So the political parties themselves must be challenged that they are discriminating if they are not exercising positive action to actually include disabled candidates on their tickets. And of course, that means also taking up disability issues. These are not parochial issues. With 1/7 of the world population impacted, then this is a major issue. If you count their families, this is a majority issue around the world, and it needs to be taken seriously. So we have much to do, but we have come some considerable way this year, and we aim to go further. Thank you. Now, Chair, I think we could open it up for anyone else.
Thank you, Richard. You have clearly highlighted the things that we have been able to do and what we are still pushing our governments to do in order for us to be able to achieve the implementation of the CRPD, and even having those laws not just enacted in our countries, but for us as OPDs to push our governments to ensure that those laws are being implemented, and we will not tire until we see that come to fruition. I wanted to talk slightly about the law ministers meeting, because I was there for a few days, and I think the day that we had a day where we met, a side meeting on practical pathways to strengthening access to justice for disabled people in the Commonwealth. And that meeting was attended by over 30 judicial officers, attorney generals from various countries. And it was such a very fruitful time for us to be able to put across the equality before the law for persons with disabilities, especially persons with mental disabilities who are disregarded by the law because of the type of disability they have. They are discriminated, and the law ministers were there. And at the end of the meeting, I could say the takeaways that we have is we had proposed, and they kind of took and were going to put in place in their countries, was the consensus on the need to develop standard guidelines for administering justice to disabled people. Participants found Tanzania's existing framework a bit quite useful, and the judge from Tanzania was also part of the meeting, and that standardization is key so that persons with disabilities are being treated on a standardized way, not like a special group, but they should be judged or given justice in a standard way. Then the need for also training for the judicial services, the administrators, and those who are part of the system when it comes to legal legal provision, the police, the prosecutors. They need to undergo some training on disability equality so that they can be able to understand what exactly to put in place, what exactly to look out for when they are doing cases for persons with disabilities. Another thing is also now to top it up, the attitudinal barriers. And there is a significant change on attitudes for persons with disability, but that still in some countries, in some places, it's still rife, and the need for us creating awareness to change the attitudes of people who look at persons with disabilities as people who are not equal in the judicial system, as something that we need to keep talking about, so that even the justice system can understand. And when they are trained and they understand disability rights and disability reasonable accommodations and the diverse types of disabilities, then it will be easier for them while dealing with such cases to be able to put across fair judgments and look at persons with disabilities as equal before the law. I think that is what I wanted to say about the law ministers meeting, and we hope that we'll be able to attend the next one and even present our disability inclusion action plan.
Well, I think we would also like to be able to work with the Commonwealth Secretariat to maybe showcase the sort of training you're talking about a day before the meeting starts, so that ministers come and actually experience the training and then can cascade it down. So we would also like to do that. There is someone called CDPF guest who wants to ask a question. I think they had a long chat about women, but maybe they want to speak now. And also Rose is on the call who wants to say something.
Yeah, they can say their name first. CDPF. The one who has raised their hand. You can speak now.
It might be Beauty. She's deaf and we need to use the signer. I might call Aisha back on.
Michael can find out for us if.
Okay, so we ask.
That is good.
Yeah, we'll make some inquiries.
And in the meantime, maybe we can ask Rose to speak. Rose, please take the floor.
She may have just dropped off. She was there all the way through.
Hi,
Still there.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to say something on when we are marking International Disability Day. I'm called Rose and I'm from Rwanda, standing as the co-chair of CDPF in mental department. I'm glad that we have a theme of which says amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for inclusive and sustainable future. This theme highlights the importance of people with disabilities as leaders and how they can make the world a fairer place for everyone. So to this, I wanted to say that it is very important because it gives us some kind of orientation and gives the dignity and respect as persons with disabilities. When I go back to persons with psychosocial disability, we still have more needs that are suitable for us, whereby we need, like to mention few, therapeutic therapy, which is like we need therapy interventions, which can include medication management, psychotherapy, and counseling, which is very expensive and doesn't be considered in our medical insurance. When I give out, when I give like an example in my country, we have medical insurance, but this cannot be put into the agenda of this system. We need support, social support. This can come from friends, family, community organization, and support groups. We need employment and housing assistance. This can help us with independence and stability. Education and skills building. This can help with coping strategies and life skills. Crisis intervention. This can help with acute situation that require immediate attention. We need psychosocial recovery coaching. This can help with setting and achieving goals and developing personal skills and confidence. Guidance. This can help us with resilience and independence. When I mentioned these few, also coping mechanism, this can help with taking everyday tasks, accessing to support services. This can help accessing support services. People with psychosocial disability may also need some joint action whereby still have barriers. We still have abusive words like unsound mind. We need equality before the law. We need standard guidance or guidelines. The way we are treated in seclusions, whereby we are locked in seclusions and no one is allowed to be nearby you, where we don't have caretakers in those seclusions or the hospitals like any other patient.
Can you say a little bit about assisted decision making, please? Because that's one of the big things, isn't it? That's not Rose.
I can't hear you, Richard.
Oh, sorry. I said, can you say something about assisted decision making?
Assisted
decision making.
In decision making, everyone in the high authorities, the local leaders, they see us as incapable. We can't decide, we can't do anything. They have that mindset that we are incapable.
Okay.
That is all I can say. Thank you so much for giving me
Thank
the
you,
platform.
Rose. We've now got CDPF on, Chair, I think.
Yeah, she's welcome to make her intervention, but your
sideways.
video is almost upside down. You can turn it like it was before.
That's it.
Yeah, that's okay. You can tell us your name and share your interventions also.
Hello. Okay. Hello. Okay. Hello. Hello.
Hi. Please.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yes. Actually, I will start by congratulating my people, persons with disability, because I'm together for a long with people with disability from their organization. There is different clusters that I am in that organization. First of all, the cluster I'm interpreting there, but I know much about people with disability, seriously. So I meet with different talented persons with disability. Some Some they are, in terms of education, they have moved forward seriously. And our chairperson here in my country, he's blind. That blind person is very educated, and he is the chairperson of Joint National Association of Persons with Disability. In that organization, we have 4 clusters. We have the deaf, physical challenge, spinal cord injury, and then the deaf. So we have and now we are fighting in our state to get that disability bill. We don't have that disability bill. That's why even the society even needs more to create more awareness to them, so that they may know the right of persons with disability. They have right to healthcare, right to vote and to be voted, right to education, quality education, and then they need accessibility, much accessible parking, like even accessible toilets. So the society needs to understand that seriously. And also, there is many cases there in my state about GBV. Now we are in the 16 days of activism. Seriously, most persons with disability get that challenge, women and girls. So more especially the area of gender and disability-based violence, women and girls face serious challenges and they cannot speak out. We need that people to be speaking out in case of breaking that culture of silence. Many people, they will use money to give to people with disability. So in order to deceive them like that, some from the family, this issue of even discrimination starts from the family background. You'll see that in family, there is people with disability there. So they will discriminate them. They will leave them at home without educating them. But people that in the same family, they don't have disability, people without disability, they took them to school, but they left that people with disability at home without carrying them to school. So from my neighbor, let me share my experience. I have a girl.
Excuse me, Aisha.
Who is
Aisha. Aisha,
Yes?
I wanted to understand the lady CDPF, she was the one you are translating for her, or you were saying something?
No, I was saying
the lady
something
was
for my
okay, maybe you can also let her speak and then she will also continue, because I see it's like she has put off her camera or something. I think she was expecting you to say what she wanted to say.
Okay.
Yes.
Interpret to her.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, let me hear. Okay.
She can come back. Can put her video on.
Okay. Oh. To. Okay. Oh, you.
I wish they could do spot both Aisha and Beauty. That would be nice.
What?
Yeah, Beauty. I think Beauty's gone off the call. So
Beauty can be on call.
yeah, I think she might have come off the call now. So I think, Aisha, we need you to be the voice for Beauty's answer. That was why I got you back on the screen, so you could voice for her. But I think we might have lost her now.
Okay. Okay, let me
Sorry,
try.
that was a bit of a misunderstanding there.
Try and try and get her back on the call, Aisha, if you can text her so that she comes back.
Yeah, I don't know if Aisha hasn't got her details. Just let me see what I can do. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. So
Yeah,
while we're waiting to see if we can reconnect, shall we ask if anybody else wants to raise any points or ask any questions now?
Yes.
Yes, who's that?
Hi, Hi, Richard. This is Goretti.
Oh, yes. Please come in. Make your point.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Happy International Day for Persons with Disabilities. I'm very happy to be with you in this meeting. I'm Namanja Goret, Program Coordinator, Commonwealth Disabled Youth Forum. So, Mr. Richard, I had made a short video, a short clip, wishing my fellow youth an International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and I shared it with Kembo, my leader. I think he can support me.
I haven't had your video, so I can't show it. Have you got it?
It's Kembo, my leader.
Yes.
The youth leader.
Yeah, he sent me one from himself, but I didn't get yours.
It's the one I think. Since the theme is about leadership,
Yeah.
I would encourage my fellow youths with disabilities, let's engage in leadership programs in our community. Because we have to start from the grassroots. Let me say there are some programs which come in our communities and they engage youth with disabilities, but some of us are still having that stigma to lead and to engage. So since our theme is having leadership, please let's engage in leadership positions such that we speak up, break the barriers and the stigma. Because if we don't speak up, no one will listen to us and no one will know and understand the challenges that we experience in the communities as youth with disabilities.
Good.
Yeah, that's all.
That's your message.
But
okay, very good. And of course,
yes, I request him at least to show a short clip of that video. Thank you.
Okay, Kimbo, if we can't get, I haven't received that. If we can't show it during this call, we'll put it up. We're going to put the whole video of this call up on our website, but we will also put up additional contributions of people who didn't get on or have different views. We also have Vida Untino, who's a youth advocate, so maybe she might want to say something. Vilda, do you want to say something? She's from Kenya, I think. Anyone else want to speak or ask a question? Because otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up, Chair, because we've been going nearly 2.5 hours. We have been going 2.5 hours. The 3 hours was just in case you all had a lot to say. There's no point keeping it going if nobody has any more they want to contribute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm devastated about Beauty. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for the misunderstanding. I've emailed her to say please come back.
Okay, well, we can, Sarah and
I
me can
don't-
say a few things for 5 minutes to keep it going.
Please, I'm just gonna. I'm
Okay,
just trying to
you
find
try
her
and
phone
do
number.
that. I think we
Hold on.
yeah.
Dr. Hamid Ali Masood wants to speak.
Yes, well, please bring them in.
Dr. Hamid, you can speak.
Yes, thank you very much.
I think you were the guy who spoke about access issues already. Is that right? Dr. Hamid?
Actually, I haven't spoken yet, but I
You
did
haven't.
email
Okay.
you earlier.
Go ahead and say what you want to say.
First of all, I would like to congratulate you all and thank you very much for this meeting. The problems that have been discussed earlier are absolutely to the point, and I do not want to repeat that. However, there are certain things I have listed that needs to be addressed in order to solve this problem of inclusion and equity at the grassroots level.
Yeah.
Let me discuss them one by one. I want I propose that the people with disability, when they move, be it for studies or a visit or work to some other country than their home country, they should immediately be allowed to exercise the disability right in that region as they were allowed back at home. I know the documentation process takes a lot of time, and let me just say that if someone comes to Pakistan for just a month, and the documentation process to exercise those rights that are for the citizens could take up to 6 months or even maybe more, and then he or she won't be able to exercise the rights such as relatively half the prices, half the fare for the transport, and other such benefits that any other citizen has. Secondly, the educational institutes should have a quota for the admission of disabled students, and relatively on a free basis. Like there shouldn't be any tuition fee at least. And they should also be provided part-time employment in that very institute they are studying in, because as we have discussed earlier, that due to unavailability of the transportation at some places, it might be difficult for them to get employment out of that institute and will definitely travel easily. And as far as the international travel is considered, we have discussed earlier, a fellow from Pakistan told us that in his village there is no proper transportation system for the blind or any kind of disabled people. But since the international airports can be designed or at least implement this policy that the disabled person should have to pay half the price of the original ticket for the ticket, right? And I and a fellow from Pakistan, maybe Abia, if I'm right, told us about that how government is working. Absolutely, government is working, and they still need time to make things great. Was this social protection fund. I'm from Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan. That is a federally administered region in Pakistan. We had recently a survey from the government to create a social protection fund, which would allow for the people with disability to receive about 10,000 PKR on quarterly basis, like 4 times a year. And that is the maximum they are offering to the people. And according to that survey, just in one district, there are 10 districts, and just in one district, there are 5,000 people with disability. And on an average, there are like 50 to 55,000 people with disability, and the total population of that region is about 50 lakhs at most. So, according to that, there is no quota in that very region for the admission of students on disability. Even if there is, in theory, there isn't any available practically. And secondly, as far as employment for disabled is considered, there is only 1% quota for entire Azad Jammu and Kashmir for the disabled people in almost every other department. However, that is also not being implemented practically. And since you mentioned about the justice system, well, recently there was protest by blind people in my city. Unfortunately, I wasn't there since I have moved to continue my studies to Moscow right now. And they were arrested, literally arrested by the police to as it was said that they are disturbing the peace of the citizens, and the business of the businessmen is being affected due to their protest. We tried everything we could from here, and we pulled some strings and got them out, but this was very humiliating, and this was very disturbing, at least to me it was. So
Okay, thank you,
there is
sir.
almost nothing regarding that. And
We've not heard about that. If you can send us any press on it, we'd be happy to take it up. We took up the mistreatment of another protester in Nigeria and took it all the way to the government there to complain about it. It does matter to come to the international organizations when these things happen. That clearly is a breach of all the things that Pakistan has signed up to. So the government needs to be held account for that.
Sure, I would definitely.
Okay,
Yeah, I would definitely send
thank
the
you for your
details in the
comments.
press for that. And the last proposal, actually, it's the important one. This was all alignment to that, to the conclusion I have come up with. That there should be a proper inclusion in legislative assembly, at least in third world countries or developing countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, and so on. Because you see, we are here and you are here. You are the General Secretary of CDPF, and whatever you say, that matters. And if we are not with the position, what we say doesn't matter. When the people with disability will be included in the legislative process, there will be an entire ministry, and I believe that should be working in alliance with the United Nations and CDPF and other such organizations to ensure that all the rules and regulations are being implemented, and guidelines of CDPF and United Nations are being followed regarding the rights of disabled people. I want to say that only the people who have suffered what it means to be disabled can actually bring the change that is much needed.
I agree with you.
And you mentioned that we should be participating in elections. I actually did participate in local bodies elections in 2023. Fortunately enough, many people voted for me. However, I could not come up victorious, but it was a great experience. But indeed, it is way costlier in countries like Pakistan to contest for elections. So that is also a problem for people with disability, I guess.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think we need to take someone else now, sir.
It was great meeting you all today.
Thank you. We understand the issues you've raised. We might have a slightly different approach. We don't think the UN will do it. We have to do it. The rights are there, but the rights are not implemented by bodies like the UN. They're implemented by people on the ground organizing and shaming their governments into doing things through direct action and use of the media. We don't think that the world is clearly demonstrates that rights don't just come, you have to fight to get them. So we hope you join a local organisation and fight with them, because that's the way that we think it has to happen. Thank you. Now, we had someone else on there. Did she want to speak? Do we know? Chelsea?
It was Charity.
Yes.
I don't know if Charity wants to speak. She'll need Aisha to sign her name, I think.
Charity? Can you sign Charity?
There is also another speaker, Naveen, who his hand.
Let's see if we can get one of the deaf speakers to do this.
I haven't managed to get Beauty back. I've sent her a WhatsApp, but she's not seen it. I've also emailed her. But if Charity's around, that'd be great. She might need Ronald to assist, because she's from southern rather than west.
She says she didn't want to speak.
Oh, she doesn't want to speak. Okay, no problem.
Okay, so let's take the person who's put up their hand, Chair.
Navid, you can speak.
Yeah, Navid Lesan. Yeah, actually, I want to highlight some issues. First of all, I would like to thank you so much for the CDPF for providing this kind of forum where we can speak the people who always discouraged and disregarded in the society, and this forum provide a way forward where we can speak and find our way to fight for our rights, and where we feel we should get some kind of equal opportunities and these kind of things.
Can you tell us where you're from, Navid?
Yeah, I am from Pakistan. I asked a question before about the accommodation issues.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I would like to highlight two basic issues. First of all, as you may know, most of the people in my country, in Pakistan, lives in the remote areas, and in remote areas, the people with disabilities always faced struggles, and they faced educational challenges, and because in my country, the schools and the higher education institutions are not available in significant amount, particularly in the remote areas. Additionally, we always faced challenges when we go for our higher educations, like for the MPhil and PhD. For instance, during my MPhil studies, the universities didn't offer any kind of inclusive or accommodative opportunities for the research facilities and other kind of things for disabled people. And we fight for this issue, and we petitioned in the court to provide some kind of special seats for the disabled people in the universities, and we win that case, and still there is it needs to improve this kind of situation. If some people want to pursue their higher education and they are disabled people, they should be included for their inclusivity and for their rights. And I include this thing as well. And these are the two most important issues which I was trying to listen from the audience, and they provide their very valuable additions into our information. And still, I thought that it should be included as well.
Thank you. Just a comment. Of course, you can set up an inclusive school anywhere in the world. It's not about infrastructure. It's not about anything. It's about the attitudes of the educators and sometimes the parents who think their children shouldn't be educated. But I've seen a fully inclusive school under a tree, as long as, people have the right attitude and the other peers are also happy to accept. And so work needs to be done on the non-disabled peers to accept people. And one of the things, just as an example, we've just submitted, there's a curriculum review here in the UK. Our curriculum has not been very inclusive. And a large number of organizations have put in that disability should actually be part of the curriculum for everybody to learn about the history of disability and get understand disability as a human rights issue. And I think if we got those sorts of things, and that could be in the curriculum in Pakistan as much as anywhere else, you then have to back it up by training, and that would include those who run universities. But the court case is the right way to deal with it. You have the laws in Pakistan since 2020. You now have to implement them by fighting the cases, and joining up with people who are like-minded is the right way to go. So thank you very much, sir, for your comment. Do we have one last person, Chair, who wants to speak? Gemma, did we get anywhere with any of the
Charity.
Charity? Charity here?
Charity said she's kind of new. I think she's a bit shy. It would be a shame because she's got a fabulous young voice.
Okay.
I wasn't able to get Beauty, I'm afraid.
All right.
It's fine.
Well, we try, and it's good that we've had sign interpretation throughout. It's just the reverse didn't seem to work quite so well, where the signer has to mouth what the person who signs.
It's true.
But we'll get it right next time. So thank you for that. I'll say a last word, and then Chair, you can wind it up, I think. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So if you are not a member of a disability organization, and we define that as organizations at whether national, regional, district or local level, which are run and controlled by disabled people themselves, we think that's the most important thing. So everybody in this call should make sure they are part of such an organization. These are democratic organizations where the majority of disabled people views hold, but of course they need to be, being disabled people organizations, mindful of the minority who might need separate adjustments. So we need to make sure that we have all the adjustments so everybody can participate in our meetings. And that costs money. So go to local businesses and elsewhere to get the money, go to government to get the money. But the government is actually required under the UNCRPD to support representative organizations. So we need to do the work from the ground upwards to build those representative organizations and then bring them together in national organizations who speak at the national level and join then with us to speak at the international level. We want to change not just the Commonwealth, we also want to change what's happening in the world, but 56 countries out of 200 is we're more than a quarter of the countries of the world, so we can have a big impact. And just for your future thoughts, we are doing capacity building in different regions. We are doing a capacity building in India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka in March. We will be going to West Africa in the autumn. These will be mainly for younger disabled people to develop their leadership as advocates. But certainly we think a lot of work will need to be done in West Africa. 29 million disabled people in Nigeria alone. So there's a huge amount to be done. And then we'll be moving on to the Pacific and running some training after that law ministers meeting in Fiji. And then finally, there'll be some training in the Caribbean before the CHOGM. And we'll also have our own face-to-face General Assembly and conference there during that time. So watch out for these things. It will be up to member organizations to nominate who they want to put forward to be at these things. And so that's part of why you need to be part of a member organization. We don't operate with individual members. We're happy to have you here to hear what we have to say, but the real push is that you need to join. And if there isn't one in your area, build one, because we're only going to do this in that way. We're only going to make the change by building our organizations up. So we wish you all very happy International Disabled People's Day, but that doesn't mean we sit on our laurels. We have to go forward and organize, because that is what we need to do to get our rights. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard, our General Secretary. I want to take this opportunity to again thank everyone who participated in this roundtable today. It has been an interesting discussion, learning that we are all facing almost the same disability rights challenges across our countries. And we need, as organizations of disabled people, to push our governments to bring them to account for what they are doing. And without us as organized groups reaching out to them, without us knowing what exactly we want them to do, it will be a bit difficult. And this session, I know, has been very educative to most of us for the things that we don't know. But for those that know, we need to put more effort in making our governments implement the laws that they have signed and ratified. And therefore, we need to pull together as a group, because as individuals, we are not able to speak with a bigger voice. For us to amplify the leadership voices of disabilities and to be able to have a sustainable development and to have inclusion in every aspect of the disability inclusion in development, then we need to move together so that our voices can be amplified and heard at all levels where decisions are made. So I want to thank you for attending this International Day Roundtable. I want to thank everybody who participated, the participants, our sign language interpreters, the captioners. I want to thank Gemma so much for always putting things together. I want to thank even the Commonwealth Secretariat for being part of this discussion, because they are quite important in the discourse, and we cannot move if we don't collaborate and have linkages with such. So thank you so much, and I want to encourage you to continue the fight, to continue the move, because it will not be done until it is done. So let us continue talking about it until we see things changing in every aspect and in every sector in our countries. I thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've had a request for a kind of group photo. Now, I don't know if this is possible. If anyone who doesn't mind wants to put their cameras on, I will try and get some screenshots.
Yeah.
I've got no idea if it'll work. But if you're up for being kind of captured in that way, then please pop your camera on and I'll see what I can do.
You might have to unpin the sign interpreter. So
I will once we all stop talking. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Where they are we able to see all the faces?
We've got quite a few there, so why don't we get
20? We are about 23 in the chat now, down from, was it 39?
Yeah, and the people have been coming and going, so I think there's been about 70 people involved in the call altogether.
Okay. Maybe for you can count when you're taking 1, 2, 3 so that we can smile. Gemma. Yeah.
Okay, so the problem is I don't know if I can get everyone at once. So
Oh.
I was trying to kind of just see if it went over 2 pages
There
or
you
more,
go.
but I don't know. So
Remove
maybe
spotlight.
just keep smiling. Yes, but I don't know how much difference that'll make. I've got gallery view, but if you could all just smile for as long as you possibly can, and I'll let you know when I've
Okay.
finished.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Is this mine?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a few people. It's really hard. I don't know what's going on. I'm not technically minded enough to get everyone. I'm so sorry. But thank you for your patience, everybody.
All right.
I'm
Thank
glad
you,
it all ended
everybody.
this way. I'm
See
glad
you
it ended
again
this
at
way.
another event.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.